Hey guys, Chicken in Maine, aka Deboo, with a YouTube video forecast update. This forecast update effective around 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, June 4th, 2020. Would like to start off welcoming new followers and to let you know that we are primarily a surf and marine forecaster covering the North Atlantic waters during hurricane season. We track tropical cyclones. We have no formal training in meteorology. We would like to tell people we have a BS from the University of Google search. We have a ton of stuff to talk to you today about, so we'll hope that you stay tuned in for all of it. Gonna start you here with the latest out of the National Hurricane Center, 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time advisory number 13 on what has become Tropical Depression Cristobal. Cristobal moved inland over Mexico and has been downgraded to a tropical depression, expected to move back out over the Gulf of Mexico via the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula and regain strength back into a tropical storm sometime around Saturday morning. There are a couple of rule of thumbs here. The number one rule of thumb during hurricane season is always verify date and timestamps. Do not share old images or old forecast tracks that are 72 hours old because we know the forecast can change. Rule number 2 of hurricane season is don't break rule number 1. And rule number 3 has to deal with the cone of uncertainty. Now, I'm showing you, this is the 3-day track, and I'm going to show you the 5-day track here in just a second. But the cone of uncertainty within 72 hours, as you notice that as the system starts to lift up, the cone starts to expand as far as width is concerned. And that is, the further out that you go in time, the larger the margin of error is concerned. When we switch you over to the 5-day, I've added the line in here. This used to be by default. The National Hurricane Center put it in there. But the other rule of thumb is it is important not to focus on the exact track of the system. And that is because of the large errors as you get out to 5 days. So when you look at a forecast cone or the cone of uncertainty, this means as this system starts to move up, as it gets into Saturday, there's nothing that says that this can't make a jog to the left side of the cone or a jog to the right side of the cone. Okay? And then as you get up here further, in the 5-day versus the current, that means at 5-day within this cone, the storm could end up over here to the left side of the cone or to the right side of the cone. That's why there is a margin of error. Another way to look at the cone would be like this. At the 5-day, if I was to take my red arrow and draw it along the edge of the cone like this, you could say this would be the circumference of the system at the 5-day, and those within that circumference could feel the effects of whatever the storm may be, a tropical storm or a hurricane. So that's why the cone of uncertainty is important to look at and to not focus on the exact track, because the system could be far wide reaching depending on the size of the system. Switch you over to the visible satellite imagery, and what you see here is a large counterclockwise rotation along here through the Bay of Campeche and through the Western Caribbean, with Cristobal, Tropical Depression Cristobal, located right here in the middle of it. So there's a very large envelope of counterclockwise spin with the main center of Cristobal right here in the center of it. With that large overall footprint, once Tropical Depression Cristobal, or the remnants thereof, move into the Gulf of Mexico, it is expected that the wind field is going to increase. Now, one of the ideas that was floated a few days ago was that Cristobal would move inland, become a depression, maybe degenerate, lose its name, and a new secondary low develop and move off the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula, and therefore becoming Dolly. Now, that option is still kind of on the table. The GFS is the one that's been on that the most. We'll show you that here in the model run in just a second. But there's still some uncertainty on exactly what's going to happen with this system and where it may go. The general consensus is that it's going to go up into Louisiana, but there could be tropical storm force winds all the way into the Panhandle region of Florida. So be in mind of that. And again, because of the large overall footprint, This thing is going to move a lot of volume of water, and storm surge and inland flooding now is starting to become a possibility and may become a problem here as we combine that with the full moon. We've got full moon tomorrow, and so at times of higher tide, at high tide, water levels are going to be high, and you're going to have street runoff into the creeks, into the streams, and then all of this southerly fetch aimed at the rivers and the inlet along the Gulf Coast, and that could back up water into the system, not allowing it to drain. So also keep that in mind. All right, going to switch you over to this afternoon's run of the GFS, and this is real time here. This is where Cristobal is located here off Mexico, and I want you to watch. I'll advance it just 6 hours, and watch the jump to the Gulf of Honduras with the L there. Now, the spin is still over land, but secondary low pressure there in the Gulf of Honduras. Advance it another 6 hours, and then watch the low lift up towards the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula, and then into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, it's possible the spin that was or is Cristobal is there, but then sometimes when you get a secondary spin like that introduced into the system, it can introduce a wobble. And I'll show you that in the Euro here in just a second, but I'll advance the model. This is Saturday going into Sunday and then into Louisiana, but watch what happens. It kind of loses its steam there, and that's probably because it's sucking in dry air. There's dry air in the western and northwestern Gulf of Mexico, and if the system gets tight, it could fight off that dryness and create its own environment. Sometimes tropical cyclones do that, but more than likely it's going to ingest some dry air and then weaken up from there. All right, going to switch you over to the afternoon run of the Euro. And again, here is the circulation associated with Cristobal. Advance the model 24 hours, and you can see this is following the National Hurricane Center's thinking that the spin is going to move up towards the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, this is on Friday, tomorrow, and then on Saturday, notice how it takes a sharp or kind of a sharp left-hand turn as it exits, and then into Sunday, up, and then into Monday, another left-hand turn. So this is that wobble that I was talking about. You can see that as this shaded area in here that's off the tip of the Nicaraguan-Honduran border, when it gets injected to the system, what happens? It pushes off to the left there. And then once it gets into the system, it straightens back up and then now back off to the left again. So this is going into Tuesday. Looks like landfall into Louisiana is a general consensus. Switch you now over to the Windy app, and this is the European model for Sunday, and I want to show you why it is important not to focus on the exact track of what the National Hurricane Center is showing you, because the difference between the models here. So this is the European model for Sunday, and I always like to compare these systems to the size of a coin, and so if this, to me, this is the size of a 50 cents piece, okay? But if this was the size of a dime, which one do you think is going to move more volume of water? The 50-cent piece or the dime? This is a very large circulation that the European model is showing developing in the Gulf of Mexico. Now look at the difference as far as time-wise is concerned, because the GFS is also showing a large system, but look at the GFS time-wise as far as Sunday and the different effects. Look at that. Now, this would produce two different effects. This is strong southerly flow into the panhandle up in here. And again, depending on what time high tide is and how much rain is there, flooding, inland flooding becomes a major concern in here along with storm surge. So surfers, those looking to travel to the panhandle of Florida to catch surf, I was thinking about going, but I've pretty much changed my mind. Not sure exactly what I'm going to do yet, but you got to understand that the winds probably are not going to be right. There's a possibility of tropical storm force winds all the way over into Panama City. I mean, you see it right here. This is just one possibility. And then switching you back over to the GFS, there's also the possibility of heavy tropical rains especially along I-10 and the interstate. So if you're thinking about traveling, that's not ideal travel weather, guys. So, if it was me, I'd reconsider. The winds aren't going to be favorable. This is just not the one, guys. So keep that in mind. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's going to be surf, but, I'd rather surf in really nice sunny weather than torrential rain and a lot of wind. All right, I'm going to switch gears up on you a second here because there is the possibility of a surf alert setting up on the Atlantic side. This image is the Euro for Monday. You can see Cristobal making landfall in Louisiana, but then off the mid-Atlantic coast, an area of low pressure is forecast to move into the Atlantic, and this is going to get some northerly winds going 20 to 25 knots, and then there is the possibility, now this is within 5 to 7 days, the possibility of some homegrown development east of the Outer Banks or north of the Bahamas. And so if this remains Cristobal in the Gulf of Mexico, we could see Dolly within 5 to 7 days as a homegrown possible development just east of the east coast of the United States, maybe out near Bermuda or northeast of the Bahamas. I'll advance the model one more for you. This is at 5 days. This is for Tuesday, and this is going to get some northeast groundswell going. Not sure how big or how much. It's just something that we are watching. I'll switch it over to you in the windy forecast map again and show that to you, and you can see the European model is developing an area of low pressure right over Bermuda, and this is going to get some northeast fetch and some northeast groundswell going. So although you might miss out on what may be over in the Gulf for you guys who were thinking about traveling, stick at home, guys. There's a shot coming up for you right here, and then there's also maybe some other stuff coming up in the extended forecast. Switch you over to the latest surface analysis out of the National Hurricane Center, and tropical wave season is here. We've already had probably 4 or 5. This pair here might be 5 and 6, but the tropical wave season is well underway. Here's what it looks like in today's high res. The one tropical wave, the lead tropical wave is right in here, and the other one is right in here. Now, this one was flaring up some convection earlier. The northern extension of the wave is up in here, and it's underneath Sal, that dry air. And so what we do, although we don't expect development off Africa until we start getting into the months of August and September, looking for those long distance runners, we always watch spin that comes off Africa because these tropical waves are going to traverse and they're going to head into the Western or towards the Western Caribbean. And if you've been following our feed or our posts, we've talked about 2 types of pattern. There's a fork in the road pattern and a round the corner pattern. And the fork in the road pattern, we use RD as Republic of Dominican. And that is that when a westward moving tropical wave is heading off this way, sometimes the northern extension of the tropical wave in here can split off the main wave axis, get north of Puerto Rico, and then get in the Bahamas where it may have a chance to develop. I've seen many a cyclone develop that way. The main wave of the body continues off into the Western Caribbean, but then the northern extension splits off and then gets in here into the Bahamas or goes up here towards Bermuda, and there's a chance for homegrown development like that. That is something that we're going to be watching for in the extended because there's 2 more tropical waves that look to be moving off Africa here in about the next 5 to 7 days, maybe 10 days, and you can already see them in the imagery in here. So all of this is part of the intertropical convergence zone, and this has a east to west movement with it. And so these tropical waves are going to be departing Africa. And typically when Sal starts to set up, when it gets thick, it typically stops around the 50 long line, the 50 longitude long line in here. And what happens is that it can't get any good air to breathe because it's covered in dust as it's spinning this way. But as soon as it pops out from the 50-yard line, then it may get into a better environment where it can start to take on moisture, or wind shear may be more favorable, that type of thing, water more warmer. So those are the type of things that we're going to be watching for over the next couple of weeks. The other things that we're going to be watching for is that models are starting to hint that a repetitive pattern may develop here in about 10 days. And what I'm talking about is this. This is the Azores are up in here, and there was been a large gale or a large area of low pressure that has developed here over the Azores. Well, the European model is suggesting that that may come back, or we may see another one in about 10 days, and then the same type setup over here in the Western Caribbean. I'll switch you back over to the Euro so you can see what I'm talking about. Now, this is Euro at 10 days. So look, another Azore low in here, right? Same as what you see right here. Now, watch when we go to look at the Western Caribbean. Now, I shared this on our social feeds earlier, but this is 10 days. And we've got 3 areas of low pressure. Now, this one area of low pressure, this is common to see this area of low pressure over here off Panama and Costa Rica. That's part of that round the corner pattern that we talked about, where area spin develops off Panama or Costa Rica, and then a westward moving tropical wave comes in here, and the main wave axis interacts with the area of low pressure, and then it rounds the corner. It lifts and rounds the corner into the Gulf of Honduras, which is the main birthing grounds for tropical cyclones to start the season. Right in here. This is where we saw Arthur come out, where we saw Bertha come out. So this is a favorable area for this time of year, climatology speaking, and it would be nothing, for the Euro the next couple of days, maybe showing an area of low pressure lifting up, just like we saw with Cristobal, lifting up out of the Eastern Pacific and then get up in here into the Gulf of Honduras or Bay of Campeche and something else spin up. Now, I want to leave you with this. Back on May 26th, this image, when we were looking at the satellite image, this popped out to us, and it stuck out like a sore thumb. And we posted on May 26th, this is extremely tempting to pin when thinking about what lies beneath. For those unaware, I pinned a tweet, as AP Weather will attest, 13 days out on Florence, just saying. Now, what I meant by that was I wasn't comparing Florence to what is underneath, which was what's down there in the Western Caribbean at the time of this tweet on May 26th. What I was referencing was 13 days. And if you take May 26th and add 13 days, I think it gives you a date of June 8th. And we're now talking about a landfall of possibly being June 7th for this system. But I want you to look at this. I'm going to zoom in for you a little bit here. And you can see there's the Florida Panhandle just to the northeast of that little white dot that you see right where I put that arrow there, right? Okay, and then Louisiana is right there to the left of your image. Let me show you today's 18Z run of the GFS. Okay, so this just came out. So May 26th, I picked that out, and we would have been right in here is where the pinned tweet would have been. It's going to end up being, I should have pinned that tweet, but I didn't want to look like a fool. I should have pinned that tweet, but you can see I wasn't that far off from what the 18Z model is showing, from what I showed you right there. That's all I got for you for now, guys. Stay tuned for the next update. Please visit the National Hurricane Center at www.hurricanes.gov for all official information. If any watches or warnings are issued for your area, please heed the advice of your local, county, state emergency management officials. Tropical storm warnings are likely going to go up either later tomorrow or could be late tonight. Stay tuned.